that. And we are, so here's one, Susie. You don't have to camera on everything, but when I see an image like this on the internet, I immediately save it because it speaks to me of the journey back home. It's just an image that one can impart an idea or a meaning to an image like this. And so I save them as a part of a collection and then get ready to use them whenever the opportunity seems to come out. So, chapter 8, section 1, the direction of the curriculum. This is a fairly short section in terms of paragraphs, but it's still a message. It seems like every section has an important message, so I can say that for every section. This is an important message, even though it's not a lot of words. And
were you finished?
David will go next.
Knowledge is not the motivation for learning this course. Peace is. This is the prerequisite for knowledge, only because those who are in conflict are not peaceful. And peace is the condition of knowledge because it is the condition of the kingdom. Knowledge can be restored only when you meet its conditions. This is not a bargain made by God, who makes no bargains. It is merely the result of your misuse of his laws on behalf of an imaginary will that is not his. Knowledge is his will. If you are opposing his will, how can you have knowledge? I have told you what knowledge offers you, but perhaps you do not yet regard this as wholly desirable. If you did, you would not be so ready to throw it away when the ego asks for your allegiance.
So just as a reminder again, knowledge refers to that state of awareness which is in direct communication with the one mind of all creation, perfect certainty, perfect union. It is beyond the perceptual issues that the course is directed toward. Therefore, knowledge is not the motivation for learning this course. That's beyond the curriculum here. But peace is most certainly the motivation and goal of this course. And peace is required to return to knowledge. For in other words, you can't be full of internal conflicts and return to the state of knowledge, because that would be a being of two minds, internal conflict. Knowledge is of one knowledge of one mind. And so there's a theme that is spoken of here that is throughout the textbook. And that is, in order to progress on the path spiritually, you must meet the conditions of the stage or phase that you are in order to enter into the next phase. So I'll use it in a sentence. You must meet the conditions of completely passing the 9th grade exams in order to enter into the 10th grade. It's a condition of entering into the 10th grade because you have to know your 9th grade materials. You have to pass that. And it's also true on the spiritual program that there is a spiritual journey that ascends. And in order to listen carefully to the words, we're not talking about having just a momentary experience, but entering into a new stage where you integrate At that level of understanding, in order to enter into that stage, you must meet the conditions of that stage. And so this theme will come up again and again. It's mentioned here with respect to the conditions for knowledge. Peace is the condition for knowledge. And so, for those of you who've been studying the course a long time, what is the condition for peace? And there's a very specific answer. You don't need to guess. You either know it or you don't. Forgiveness is the condition for peace. You must have forgiven. Stop blaming other people. Stop blaming the world and let it all go in order to enter into peace. And then to experience peace as a stage, enduring peace, that's the condition for entering into knowledge. And this goes on and on. It loops on and higher. It's not so much the intent today to go through all those stages as to point out that there are gates that operate conditions that must be met in order for one to fully and completely enter into the next stage. Julie?
Yeah, so what I like about this section here, or actually I know it's like just the first thing, but it basically, when it says knowledge can be restored only when you meet its conditions, it's telling us, I think, that we had it once and now it's going to be restored. So something that's going to be restored, you already have. And then the very last line tells me what I've been doing, that I need to have it restored because I've been aligning with the ego, which you're using the example of forgiveness. But anytime I throw peace away, I'm aligning, my allegiances with the ego. I'm following the ego. I'm aligned with that thought system. And so really it's the conditions. I feel like the conditions are very easily met. I don't feel like it's hurdles being thrown in front of us.
True.
I feel like it's very easily met by me changing my allegiance to, being vigilant for God, or however you want to say it. Forgiveness, there's a million different ways, and the rest of the book's going to tell us all the different ways. But it's not, for me, I don't think it's hurdles. I think when that line about meeting the conditions, I think God makes it very simple for us.
True, it does. And Susie?
Yeah, to follow up what Julie was saying, I totally agree. But I mean, I hate the word but there it is. I guess I don't always hold it wholly desirable because I love this line, when the ego asks for your allegiance. So if I'm persuaded to follow somehow, that is those two sentences. I mean, those two words, it has to be wholly desirable. Like you always say, I have to fall in love with it. It has to become my habit. So I'm not persuaded when the ego asks for my allegiance. I mean, there it is right there, what Julie's saying. It's really simple if we don't side with the ego.
Yes, it is. So the workbook lessons, 154, 155, have really spoken to me. And so I'm going to cross-reference some of that with what we're reading here. For instance, the lesson, in my defenselessness, my safety lies, contrasts the arrogance of the ego asserting its view is the one you ought to believe in, its effort to remain in control, versus the humbleness of the soul that gladly and willing, Susie, this comes down to wholly desirable, gladly and willingly acknowledges that the ego offers me nothing, but that the spirit offers me everything I could ever want. And so that it becomes, once one reaches that point, they realize there is nothing out of the ego that I want. So they're not so ready to throw away the experience of spirit guidance, so that they're not willing to trade a misuse of God's laws in favor of an imaginary will. So one becomes clear about these things. And my understanding was that in doing those lessons, that there's many things that go on that are hidden from my conscious mind, that goes on in the background. I didn't even realize it was defensiveness, and it was efforts for the ego to armor up against perceived threats there. And in return, the ego then wants to jump out in front and be your guide. And so I will step back and let him lead the way is very consistent with recognizing one's defenselessness is a restoration of what you truly desire, is to be guided by spirit. And so, yeah, so that's the practice. That's why practice is so important. So it makes first person, it confronts me in the real world in my daily circumstances with how to apply these spiritual laws to everyday things. Okay, we'll go on.
The distractions of the ego may seem to interfere with your learning, but the ego has no power to distract you unless you give it the power to do so. The ego's voice is an hallucination. You cannot expect it to say, I am not real. Yet you are not asked to dispel your hallucinations alone. You are merely asked to evaluate them in terms of their results to you. If you do not want them on the basis of loss of peace, they will be removed from your mind for you.
So there's only 4 or 5 sentences here, but I think there's a lot to be said here. So first of all, I ask you, does the ego have the power to distract you?
Only if I allow it.
So the answer is yes, under the circumstances. If I allow it, then we've all felt the power of the ego to distract us. But we were a partner in that process. And if we refuse, through watching our mind, guarding our mind, setting healthy boundaries, refuse to partner with the ego, then it has no power whatsoever. But only so your willingness to not partner with the ego and partner with the Holy Spirit instead determines where your power goes, where the power of your mind to choose goes. So that's an important to realize and acknowledge we have all given power to the ego, and we know what that feels like. It feels so strong, and so because we made it real in our own perceptions, and thus we're responsible for our choosing. And here's this line that I've been interpreting. You can count on the ego to insist that its way you should follow. You can depend on it to regularly attempt to distract you from God's way. And so it's should not be a surprise when that ego guidance crosses the threshold of your awareness. It's predictable. And once you know it's predictable, you can decide how are you going to react to that. And it's always by letting it pass and pausing and realizing there's another choice and doing that all the time. So here's the major theme that I want to emphasize again and again. The one right use of judgment is to judge the ego. There is one correct use of judge, not to judge the ego in others, to judge the ego's thought process in your own mind. Otherwise, you can't distinguish between guidance systems. And so you are merely asked to evaluate, to judge them in terms of the results to you. We're talking about the hallucinations of the ego. You are merely asked to evaluate them in terms of the results, the effects they've had on you. And if you do that, and the Course encourages us to do that in terms of, am I at peace or not? If you evaluate the effects of the ego, oh my goodness, what did I just do? I think I just lost my page. Let's see. Okay, we're back. Almost. Am I still sharing? Okay. So if you evaluate the effects of the ego based on your loss of peace, that is your it's telling us right here, you have an internal, can I call it a barometer, a monitor, which will tell you right away what is the source of guidance that I'm following. Peace is the assurance that you're following Holy Spirit's guidance. You're okay with it. Whereas fear and uncertainty is the inevitable result of ego guidance. Noel?
My lesson for today is 99, and there are 2 lines for the hourly practice, and I want to read the second one because I've been applying it to such things as the seduction of the ego. God is still love, and this is not his will. So as I am feeling a lack of peace, I identify what this is, and what usually it's fear, maybe disappointment, discouragement, something like that. So, and I keep repeating that line. God is still love, and this blank is not his will. And it has helped a lot to identify, as you say, judge, identify, and turn away from the negatives of the ego.
Yes, yes, beautiful. And right there, this is not his will. That's a judgment against the ego. Now, we always have to footnote that to say, when you practice with judgment, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used against others' minds. That is not the way the Course teaches to use judgment. Therefore, there is only one application of judgment that is for your growth and healing, and that is to judge the thoughts that cross in your own mind. The risk is that you will take that ability to judge and discern and start occupying your mind with noticing the ego in others. And that carries us into judgment, weaponizing judgment. And that is not the intent of the Course. In fact, we should look for and listen for the Holy Spirit, the light in others, not to evaluate their ego. David?
Every response to the ego is a call to war, and war does deprive you of peace. Yet in this war, there is no opponent. This is the reinterpretation of reality that you must make to secure peace, and the only one you need ever make. Those whom you perceive as opponents are part of your peace, which you are giving up by attacking them. How can you have what you give up? You share to have, but you do not give it up yourself. When you give up peace, you are excluding yourself from it. This is a condition so alien to the kingdom that you cannot understand the state that prevails within it. Your past learning must have taught you the wrong things, simply because it has not made you happy. On that basis alone, its value should be questioned. If learning aims at change, and that is always its purpose, are you satisfied with the changes your learning has brought you? Dissatisfaction with learning outcomes is a sign of learning failure, since it means that you did not get what you wanted.
So 1 or 2 weeks ago, Lee asked if the ego could correctly be characterized as the enemy. And we said that that's not really that's not helpful in terms of the Course in Miracles. Here, the word they're using is the opponent, but the meaning is the same: enemy, the opposition. The Course teaches there is no opponent. The ego wants you to be in conflict with it. It wants you to enter into a fight and a struggle with it, because its goal is to deprive you of peace. And so we don't give the label of enemy or opponent to the ego. Remember that the ego is merely a set of false beliefs about yourself. It's not an entity. It's not a living thing or a being. It's not a reality. There is, in truth, there is no ego. That's just a label for the collection of past learnings that we've all had about ourselves. And here is one of the most profound statements. There is no opponent. There is no ego. And listen carefully. This is the reinterpretation of reality that you must make to secure peace, and the only one you ever need make. There isn't an ego after us, chasing us, an entity to be feared, an enemy to be battled with, an opponent. It's a type of false dogma. I prefer to call it a narrative of our personal past, which mistakenly identifies us all as separate. And therefore, it's easily swept away by changing your mind about what you want for yourself, who about, first of all, recognizing who you truly are, and then coming to identify with the truth for yourself, and then training your mind to remain attentive to that truthful identity. So anytime you give up your peace, you are excluding yourself from peace and from your true reality. And so tonight's reading is about the direction of the curriculum. And what we've said many times, the most important decision you can make is the direction you're headed. And the metaphor that I like, imagine you were out on an ocean where you can't see land in anything, and you have no instrumentation, and you need to find land. The most important decision you can make is the direction you go in. Because if you go in the wrong direction, that is only going to delay your journey and your arrival. So in A Course in Miracles, your direction becomes a profound decision of purpose. And that's what we're focusing on tonight. What is make it clear in your own mind, if it's not already, about what direction you choose for yourself. And the idea here is you should already have the internal barometer, which is lack of peace or being in peace, that tells you at any given time what direction you're headed in. Noel?
In terms of the ego and conceptualizing it, I found very helpful your definition that the ego is a set of ideas. This doesn't make it an opponent. It doesn't make it a demon. It doesn't demonize it. It's a set of ideas, and I have thought of it as like a set of twigs that in the end we don't really need. We can just toss them away.
Yeah, I'm really with you, Noel, on the metaphor with twigs. Something that has no value to us is easily discarded. And this echoes an idea in the workbook lesson. I will step back and let him lead the way, in that there comes a point in your journey, in our journey, where, let's see, this is a bit of a sidebar here. Yeah, I do want to take a moment to do this. There are 3 possible reactions that miracle students have to the proposal that you abandon your investments in the ego and take up your investments with the Holy Spirit. There's 3 possible reactions. One is you say, no, I want to keep the ego. Okay, that's one. 2, careful now, is you say, well, I've been told to do that by the Course of Miracles. That's the right thing to do. So I'm going to follow the directions given me. But boy, this is going to be, I'm going to sure miss all that I had from before. I'm paying a price, a sacrifice, in order to adopt the Holy Spirit's way. So I'm going to do it out of obligation, call it spiritual duty, but boy, it's a big price. That attitude breeds resentment, because I've had to pay a cost that I didn't want to pay. My real desire was to hang on to what I was getting from my ego illusion. And then there's the third option, which is the one, and by the way, I spent most of my journey in that second phase. Okay, so I know it well. This is not about me. I know whereof I speak here. The third phase was referred to in the workbook lesson. I step back and let him lead the way. Is when we come to the place where we rejoice that we were mistaken in the ego. When we, and in order to do that, we have to fully judge the consequences of what the ego has brought to ourselves and to the people that we care about, to the world in general. Fully judge it and rejoice that we were mistaken, that the ego has no, love cannot be found there, peace can never be eked out of that darkness and chaos. I'm more than happy to throw those twigs away. They mean nothing to me now. And that third level of rejoicing that we were mistaken is what unleashes the heart and enables us to be happy learners and to be glad to be in conjunction with the Holy Spirit. The intermediate way, so this is a bit of a cautionary message, the intermediate state where we would still like to hang on to a few select ego situations, opportunities, whatever you want to call them, because they mean so much to us. That situation embedded in it is half-heartedness. It splits ourselves between wanting to be partially invested in the ego and partially willing to follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And anybody that would like to talk about that in more detail, please see me afterwards. I could share. I have lots of stories to share with that. Susie?
It's funny because my question kind of leads in. It's, I found that for me, when I started to see some peace and things removed from my mind, then I became so willing to, because it's an experiential course, right? So I rejoiced at the fact that none of that was real, right? But my question, I'm just stuck on this line, Jonica. So, but you kind of just explained it by this is the direction of the curriculum. But the last sentence of the second paragraph was, if you do not want them on the basis of loss of peace, they will be removed from your mind for you. So, like, I understand that now from going through the course a couple times and doing my workbook lessons over and over and over again. But like, if I read that, like, I would think, wow, that's just like really easy. I'll just tell the Holy Spirit, I have a loss of peace, and you're just going to remove that from my mind. And I just don't think it's that easily done. It doesn't talk about anything like willingness in there and vigilance. And, so just from my experience, I have had things completely removed from my mind, which is incredible for me. But I just feel like that sentence is like, what's the word? Just like black and white. And then we move on to the next paragraph. And I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? I just don't think it's removed so quickly. If I just say, I have a loss of peace.
Yeah. I think I hear you.
I mean, I might be intellectualizing it, but I'm just caught on it because it just seems so cut and dry, black and white.
So in general, in the course, whenever any statement is made, we can't cherry pick that statement out and separate it from the rest of the message of the course, which as part of all that is mind training is necessary, because Susie, we all know, or I know, that I can have a thought and then let it go and be at peace, and 5 minutes later return to entertaining that thought again.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And
Because it's
so mind training, so
Right.
the context of the entire course is necessary. We must be willing to train our minds. Introduction to the workbook. An untrained mind can accomplish nothing. It cannot remain at peace, even though it can have a moment of quiet. It then, lacking training, will drift back into the distractions of the ego. So yes, it has to be taken in the context of the entire program.
Yeah, I just needed you to talk about it for a second. Thank you.
Sure, no, that's all right. So we had a couple other comments. Julie?
Yeah, so I was really listening to what Susie was sharing, and it sounds, yeah, it sounds like, oh, how is it going to be that easy? But Susie, you also commented on the line about when it becomes wholly desirable.
Right, it's like entirely ready in the 12 steps. Right.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. So when that, and Jonica's talking about, you know, the training and doing the lessons. So when you have reached, you know, when you have reached that point where it is wholly desirable, it is that easy to just go and say, please remove this, and it is removed.
No, Julie, my question wasn't that, because I know that to be true as well. I just was surprised it didn't have a follow-up sentence talking about that. That's all that my question was. It isn't that my question was, it just, and we don't have to get off track with this. It just seemed unusual for the course to make a statement like that without some kind of follow-up of something. I didn't even have to bring it up because I know how it works. I just, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
All right.
But
Good.
thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, you had a comment.
Yeah, my experience, and I don't know whether this would help or not, but my experience is that this course is very humbling for me, because when I think I got it, there's another layer. And it just keeps coming off in layers. So my understanding too is that we are all going to get there, and that no one will be left behind. So it makes sense to me that it would come off in layers, because I don't think the world would be looking, neither my world or the whole world in front of me would be looking like it is if we are all one-minded. It just wouldn't look like this. So it just helps me to forgive myself when I understand that it comes off in layers.
Nice. And that's a really important message. Be gentle with yourself. I really like the grade school metaphor. There's nothing wrong with being in the 5th grade. We're not, you know, we're headed towards the next level of forgiveness, which is just fine. It'll come to us when we're ready, when we're willing and wholly willing to accept it. It's, as Sandra said, it comes in layers or in phases, and we've been doing that our entire life. And so accept it, that it's true of your spiritual journey as well. Be kind and gentle with yourself. See, am I on the right paragraph, David? I guess.
Yeah, I don't know, did we do,
I lost my place here.
did we, I don't know, because Susie took us back to that other paragraph.
I know.
I'm kind of confused
No, I'll
myself.
tell you, we're on
Hmm.
paragraph 5. That's right.
Curriculum
Okay.
of the atonement. Okay.
The curriculum of the atonement is the opposite of the curriculum you have established for yourself, but so is its outcome. If the outcome of yours has made you unhappy, and if you want a different one, a change in the curriculum is obviously necessary. The first change to be introduced is a change in direction. A meaningful curriculum cannot be inconsistent. If it is planned by two teachers, each believing in diametrically opposed ideas, it cannot be integrated. If it is carried out by these two teachers simultaneously, each one merely interferes with the other. This leads to fluctuation, but not to change. The volatile have no direction. They cannot choose one because they cannot relinquish the other, even if it does not exist. Their conflicted curriculum teaches them that all directions exist and gives them no rationale for choice.
So, couple ideas. We will make reference to the curriculum of the atonement again and again. There are other curriculums on the spiritual path. Course in Miracles is a curriculum intended to help us pass through forgiveness to inner peace. There are additional curriculums that are referenced indirectly in the course, such as knowledge is beyond the scope of this curriculum. There is more than what is found in the Course of Miracles, but this is what is needed in our world now, is movement from a sense of fear and guilt and the false weaponizing judgment into a sense of forgiveness and healing and understanding and inner peace. That's what is needed. So curriculum, we will refer to A Course in Miracles as the curriculum. The first change needed is a change in direction. And so this is, try not to get on my soapbox here, but I do have a message here. A meaningful curriculum cannot be inconsistent, because if it's planned by more than one teacher, each believing in diametrically opposed ideas, it cannot be integrated. It's two different opposing ideas will split your beliefs, you split your understanding and awareness. It can't be integrated. And if it can't be integrated, then it's not leading to union. So personal story that happened with me 6-7 years ago. Dr. James Finley, who's written several books, I consider him to be a master spiritual teacher, who is teaching one of his workshops in Boca Raton. And he said that when you're at the beginning of the spiritual journey, it's like a spiritual smorgasbord, I think he called it, like a buffet. There are hundreds of things you can pursue spiritually. And he said in the beginning of your path, it's okay to go through, you know how when you go to a buffet, you take a little bit of each dish, but you don't just like eat a meal of one thing. Okay, I don't say you don't, but some people do take so that they have 30 different samples on their plate when they come back. It's sampling the spiritual paths that are out there. And he said, that's fine when you're in the initial phases of your spiritual journey. You'd sample all that and find out what works for you, what you like. But sampling keeps you in shallow waters. It doesn't really help you to fully appreciate what you've got. And his advice was, this changed my life, that once you find something that speaks to you and works for you, make a whole meal out of it. Stop being in sampling mode and go deep with it. His view was that there are multiple curriculums that can take you to a deep spiritual experience, but not if you're trying to sample. So to go deep, you have to make a meal out of your spiritual path. And for many of us, that's over years, consistency over years to make a meal out of it. But so recognize, and at that time, at that time, I did took an inventory of how many spiritual books and groups I belonged to. It was 8. In 1 week, or at least in every month, I would participate in 8 different spiritual teachings, books, readings. To me, they were all kind of supported one another, but there were 8 different teachers. And so that's when I made a commitment to Course in Miracles as the program that was working for me. If you're a meaningful curriculum cannot be inconsistent. If you're receiving inconsistent messages from multiple different teachers at once and accepting them as true, then their inconsistency will lead to internal conflict and confusion. It cannot be integrated if they're not consistent. One merely interferes with the other. The volatile have no direction. So he didn't say this, but now I see it in Course in Miracles. I didn't have a clear direction. I was moving in 8 directions. And I thought that was really cool too, by the way. That was really, look at all these things that I knew. Why am I bringing all this up? Because the Course is talking about a conflicted curriculum, teaches them that all directions exist and gives them no rationale for choice. And there are many schools of thought that would encourage you to move in all directions. And so if you want that, I don't believe you can truly find that in Course in Miracles. It's available elsewhere. That's a different curriculum available in other environments. It's a choice. Okay, sorry for being on my soapbox there, but that was my experience and it had a profound impact on me. David?
The total senselessness of such a curriculum must be fully recognized before a real change in direction becomes possible. You cannot learn simultaneously from 2 teachers who are in total disagreement about everything. Their joint curriculum presents an impossible learning task. They are teaching you entirely different things in entirely different ways, which might be possible, except that both are teaching you about yourself. Your reality is unaffected by both, but if you listen to both, your mind will be split about what your reality is. There is a rationale for choice. Only one teacher knows what your reality is.
So having said everything that it just said, there's a subtle distinction here that you should notice with regards to having multiple teachers, they are teaching you entirely different things in entirely different ways, which might be possible, except when they are teaching you about the nature of your being. And you cannot be a holy member of creation and also believe that you're something else, that you're not. And so these are the, so it might be possible to have teachers teaching you different things, but not when it comes to understanding what you are. That is the central thought to any thought system, is what am I? What are you? What is my being? And if that is still uncertain or in question, or you have a conflicted curriculum, then it's going to create only confusion and split your mind about what your reality is. Susie?
You know, this is fascinating for me because I'm just thinking of therapy. And like I always say now, I could only see a therapist now who believes in the Holy Spirit or bringing God into the room, or, you know, because of like the course has taught me about myself. And I'm just reflecting back years ago when I had a therapist many, many, many years ago, long before this, who taught me completely different things about myself, you know, and it wasn't until the course that I really, this really just makes just so much sense. So, yeah, you know, I often express how, to me, I couldn't be in therapy. Well, this is therapy, but if I chose to talk to somebody, it would have to be somebody that had these same beliefs.
An understanding, sure. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Susie. I noticed that the next paragraph in the next section speaks to what we just read about. So we're not going to go any further than one paragraph into the next section. But so that would be in your books, the difference between imprisonment and freedom. Notice how it picks up, because we were just talking about your ability to choose with regard to what your reality is. Okay. And this comes back again to how many teachers can you accommodate at one time? David? You're muted.
There is a rationale for choice. Only one teacher knows what your reality is. If learning to remove the obstacles to that knowledge is the purpose of the curriculum, you must learn it of him. The ego does not know what it is trying to teach. It is trying to teach you what you are without knowing what you are. It is expert only in confusion. It does not understand anything else. As a teacher, then, the ego is totally confused and totally confusing. Even if you could disregard the Holy Spirit entirely, which is impossible, you could still learn nothing from the ego, because the ego knows nothing.
And to use Noel's idea, all it can offer you is a bunch of twigs. that ultimately are better off discarded rather than being carried along. So this is the central premise, that with regard to your being, the truth of you and what you are, there is only, I think this is a universally true statement. You test it out. There is only one teacher that knows, not perceives or believes, but that knows what your reality is. We're referring to the Holy Spirit. Knows your reality, because the Holy Spirit stands with one eye towards heaven and eternity and the other towards helping us to heal. She knows what our reality is. And since learning in this path is intended to remove the obstacles to understanding what our reality is, therefore you must learn it of the Holy Spirit. And if you try to accommodate another teaching system that does not recognize what you are, it'll teach you something different about yourself. And that creates, which you can do, but it will continue to create conflict within in an attempt to try to, because the mind, when you give the mind two different belief systems, it right away goes to work on trying to make them work together, attempting to integrate them. And you either are holy, eternal, loving being, or you are not. So any effort to integrate the idea that you are not, again, cannot be integrated. It's just a delaying. There's nothing wrong with all this. It's just a delaying maneuver of the ego. Noel? You're muted.
I took the two curricula as the egos or the Holy Spirits.
Yes.
And from that standpoint, it's not difficult to understand how they could absolutely be in conflict.
Right.
In terms of other human spiritual teachers and their principles, I have found that I'm a buffet person, or I was a buffet person. I also have called it spiritual gluttony. But I found some are very complementary to the Course. And I do a little of some others.
Mm-hmm.
But for me now, something like you, maybe not as deep, but I really have committed to the Course above all. And it's the grounding for all my spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thank you for sharing that, Noel. And so this brings up an interesting question, which we're not going to, it's a rhetorical question. Take it as a assignment for yourself. Is the Holy Spirit able to teach through other curriculums that are being shared by humans of flesh and blood? I guess the inverse, or another way of asking that, is A Course in Miracles the only teaching system that the Holy Spirit teaches through?
No, because the Course in Miracles says that God is in everything I see. So it's in, it's everywhere.
Ditto that.
Exactly. It's in everywhere and everyone. In fact, the Course teaches us to listen to the Holy Spirit in others, to look for or listen to, acknowledge and recognize the Holy Spirit in others. So there are many forms, the key thing is that we focus on the Holy Spirit content in whatever form, whatever situation that we're in. And that requires that we learn to distinguish the voice of holiness, of the eternal laws, from other messages, of which it comes back again to the one right use of judgment, is for you to be able to judge the effects of the ego on you. The form that was shared here was, does it bring you peace or loss of peace? That's as far as we are going to go in our reading tonight. It's been my habit of recent ask David if he had any comments or what your thoughts were on the reading that we shared tonight.
Thank you. I have a lot of thoughts and some comments. One, with our recent discussion, reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Suzuki Roshi, which is, in the beginning, or in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And I think that's a lot of what we were talking about the smorgasbord of spiritual paths. I really liked this in terms of, forgiveness is the past is the necessary condition of peace. Because anytime I am having anything from the past interfering with my current thought, it's not peace, and it's not present. We talked about peace as the goal as the prerequisite for knowledge, and and then you said that knowledge is the course doesn't teach knowledge. We gain knowledge. And I love the stuff about there's no opponent. The ego is not my opponent. There is no opponent, but I do give him all the power. I do give the ego all the power that it has, and every power that it has results in war. It says it's all war. All right. And if I'm not happy today, my curriculum's not in the right direction. So this was about the direction of the curriculum. So it's up to me to change the direction that I'm in. And I had and speaking of which, and that the idea that Susie talked about, they will be removed from your mind for you. And that's the big, to have, I have to give. What I give up, quote, sacrifice, allows me to gain the peace, to gain the Holy Spirit. I had the most amazing conversation last night at a little cocktail party or get together. And this guy told me, I said, who is that guy over there? I don't know him. And the guy who I was talking to said, that guy's the smartest guy you're ever going to meet in your life. And so I said, really? I'm a little, I said, I know a lot of smart people. So I went up to him later and I engaged him in conversation. And it turns out he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's brilliant. He's an Orthodox Jew who spoke completely in terms of quantum physics and the Course in Miracles, but from a biblical concept, from a God creation concept. And everything he said was completely consistent with the Course in Miracles, and which I think is helpful in answering some of the questions that were brought up a little earlier. We had the greatest conversation. It was unbelievable. So that's my comments.
Go to a cocktail party only for cocktails.
That's right. I don't drink, so I'm definitely not there for cocktails. But it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And, being in this course, and, I'm an egomaniac at times, and Susie can certainly attest to the fact that I falter many, many times. But the course has allowed my mind to be opened up to possibilities and to concepts, thoughts, awareness that in a different manner than ever before. So I think I'm really grateful for that.
I just wanted to clarify, because I heard you right. He spoke about the Torah and quantum physics, and what you heard were messages from the Holy Spirit and the Course of Miracles.
Well, he talked also about, we all can have this own universe in our mind that makes us think that we're different than the next person next to, but our universes are completely intertwined.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And the universe itself is without time. Okay. And that the concepts now is that from the Big Bang, that it not only doesn't just go out, but it goes out and unfolds upon itself back in, so that there's never a moment that isn't the same.
Great. Wow. Well, that is a great illustration of what we're talking about. The Holy Spirit speaking through many different forms and being able to hear. Those who have ears to hear, let their ears be open, their eyes be open to hear the spiritual message. Thank you, David. Heather?
Yep, it really just shows that only the truth is true. No matter the source, it's the truth is true. It rings loud and clear. And you hear it, like you said, you recognize the Holy Spirit's voice and you know it, and it's just rings so true, and it just brings such joy. Thanks for sharing that, David.
Thank you. Noelle?
It also shows that Course in Miracles students don't have a monopoly on the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit comes through so many people who may or may not be, quote, religious or even spiritual. And that to be sensitive to that and to listen for it and to acknowledge it is one of the things that I'm doing more and more, and reaping responses. I'm thinking of a man I met recently where I was sitting. He came in the door and he looked at me and he said, "Jesus Christ reigns." He wasn't a Jehovah's Witness or anything like that. He was a regular person. And I said, absolutely, and so it was like a real meeting, a light together.
Great. Hey, I have to thank you, Noelle. I have to share one more thing before we go, because it's just hot off the press here. Give me a moment where I fiddle with the technology. Here we go. Because I told you I was really moved by the workbook lessons of the last few days. So this is a combination of ideas that were inspired by the workbook lesson 155. I will step back and let him lead the way. It says, I don't know what anything, including this, means. And so I do not know how to respond to it. And I will not use my own past learning as the light to guide me. By this refusal to attempt to teach yourself, myself, what you do not know, the guide whom God has given you will speak to you. He will take his rightful place in your awareness the instant you abandon it and offer it to him. You cannot be your guide to miracles, for it is you who made them necessary. Therefore, I will step back and let him lead the way. And so this has really been speaking to me a lot lately about how arrogant my ego is in terms of wanting to control the narrative that passes across the screen of my mind, and how vigilance is necessary to be alert to that. I don't blame the ego for doing that. I count on the ego doing that. It's how do I respond to those opportunities is really the arena of choice that we're learning to make better choices. Sandra?
Yeah, another one that really helps me because I'm such a doer is I need do nothing. It really just says, okay, just you don't know what to do here, so just don't do anything. Just turn it over to the Holy Spirit and just wait on the Holy Spirit. And you know, I would feel guilty or the ego would really want me to get in there and start making a bigger mess. So I need do nothing is very helpful.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Well, all right, friends, that was the direction of the curriculum. We'll pick it up next weekend with section 8.2. And in the meantime, remember that if there's no direction at all that's clear in our mind, we need to take a pause and recollect our thoughts and recall that Holy Spirit's guidance is always there. And if we're willing to turn to it, she is surely ready to lead us. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Jonathan. Thank
Love
you.
you all.
Thanks,
Namaste.
everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you
By the
for,
way, I love your photographs and your creativity in putting the slides together. They really impact with the messages. So there.
great. Thank you, Noel. It's part of my art. I enjoy it myself a great deal.
By the way, if you ever, I don't know